This is the Khmer Times News. My name is Paolo Bonini, and these are your headlines. Myanmar in the spotlight as the brutality goes on. A monk is beaten to death by an enraged husband. And the 57-year-old who's been trying to pass her high school exams for many long years, well, those results are in. But did she pass? Firstly, at our headline story, and that is the PM has met with the military leader of Myanmar for the very first time in a hope of finding a peaceful resolution to the country's crisis. The PM pressed home the ASEAN 5-point plan. That includes an immediate stop to all violence in Myanmar. Sornaro, the minister in charge of ASEAN affairs, said this week that ASEAN leaders have strongly opposed violence against civilians as well as public property, calling for an immediate stop to the violence. But it is his final lines that were the ones that were very telling indeed. And they hinted as to how difficult any progress with Myanmar is. For he said, the resolution of Myanmar's problems ultimately lie in the hands of the Myanmar people, with ASEAN member states providing support and encouragement. And he is right. With such an internal conflict, there is only so far advice or even sanctions can go against such a brutal military dictatorship. The military junta overthrew the democratically approved government in 2011. And Amnesty International has said that the crackdown by the military has only intensified. Thousands of people have been arbitrarily detained, and more than 1,000 opposition politicians and human rights defenders have been convicted in unfair trials. If that is not bad enough, widespread torture continues. And even that is not the bottom of the barrel, as Amnesty reports that 4 men were executed on politically motivated charges. There is also the ongoing military attacks on civilians that have resulted in hundreds of deaths and mass displacement. It is reported over 3,000 innocent people have now been killed in the country's turmoils, and it seems there is no light at the end of the tunnel. For the people of Myanmar, only more suppression and death by a military government that does not protect its people, but it enslaves them. On our crime desk this week, a woman is beaten so savagely she miscarriages her child. A monk is also beaten but he dies at the hands of an enraged husband. And do you remember that 57-year-old taking her high school exams? Well, the results are in, and I tell you, if she passed or if she failed. There is something very eerie and gruesome about a body being found in water. All too quickly, the imagination fills with the horrors of what could possibly lead to a person's body being dumped in a lake. Well, that was the sad demise for this man, who was just 31 years of age. He looked so very young and so very full of life. Who would ever think that just a few short hours later he would look like this, a bloated corpse left floating in a lonely reservoir, his last resting place on this earth. A local to the area spotted an object in the water, and not sure as to what it was, they edged closer, and to their absolute horror, they saw the decaying corpse of the young man. They reeled back in horror and immediately called the police. When arriving, the police fished the body from the water, and they then discovered someone had tried to make his body disappear. For around the victim's arms and legs, the dead man had 20 kilos of metal weights. But the killer had made a mistake. He had failed to know what happens to a human body when it decays. For it's not long after the death, a body balloons with air as bacteria goes to work. And it was that decaying process that brought the dead man's body back into the light. The dead man was a Chinese man, and his wife had last seen her husband at 10 p.m. on October the 29th, when he went to visit his cousin's house in Park City. The cousin has said he left at 1 a.m. the next morning, and it was then that he disappeared. But just as we go to press here, we have had some breaking news on this story. And that is, a Chinese man has now been arrested for this murder. But at current, we have no more details. The headline read, "A woman loses her child after being beaten by ex-husband and his mistress." Now, before we go into the details here, it is worth taking a note of how savage a beating must be for a woman to miscarry. After all, a pregnant lady is indeed vulnerable, but is also designed to withstand unexpected knocks. After all, the fluid in a mother's stomach acts as one huge cushion to disperse any blunt force trauma. A lady falling over or similar very, very rarely suffers a miscarriage. So this attack itself was exceedingly brutal. The incident took place at 9 o'clock one night last week in Phnom Penh. Sources from the victim's family have said that the incident occurred when the victim took her son and her daughter to her husband's house in Sen Sok to ask for financial support. But when the victim arrived, she knocked on the door of the house and she called out to her husband repeatedly to come out and meet her. She stood there with her young son and daughter. The husband, though, wanted nothing to do with his ex-wife, but she persisted. It was then, to the horror of the two children, that not only did their father start beating their pregnant mother, but also his new lover rained blows down on that defenseless woman. The scene that those children witnessed was appalling. Their mother miscarried right there in front of them on the stone floor as the beating continued. In the end, the attackers retreated, and soon an ambulance was called and the woman was told she had lost her child. The two suspects have now been questioned by the police. Last week, we had the horrifying story of how a monk raped and killed a girl who was just 3 years old. Well, this week another monk is in the news, but this time he is the victim, as Kampong Speu Provincial Court have now charged and jailed a man for the murder of a monk that he suspected of having an affair with his wife. The murder took place at 10 a.m. in the pagoda in Krang Pano village, and it was not just the enraged husband that was involved. On finding out that his wife was having an affair with the monk, the husband confronted her, and on getting her to confess her infidelity, the farmer flew into a rage, one that could be only quenched by blood. He told his wife she would have to help him to balance the scales of justice, and she would need to lure the monk to a meeting. And so it was. On the morning of October the 16th, they set out to the peaceful pagoda, the monk himself suspecting nothing. But on their arrival, all hell broke loose. The farmer savagely beat the monk. Police afterwards said that one of the items taken from the scene was, in fact, a statue of Buddha. Now, if that was used in the beating is not yet known. But during police interrogation, the suspect confessed that he had beat the victim and then strangled him to death. He also confessed that he was jealous and angry with the monk for having an affair with his wife. He admitted that he had forced his wife to help him to carry out this murderous plot. The suspects for now have been sent to prison, and they are awaiting trial. In closing our crime desk this week, a very quick update for you. Do you recall this lady? A 58-year-old who for the past 3 years in a row has been trying to get her secondary school exam certificate. For years now, she has valiantly battled on, retaking the exam year after year after year, but failing each and every time. And even by her own confession, she admits she's a bit rubbish at the old maths and English, but she is determined to get the exam certificate she rates so highly. Well, the exam results are out, but did she pass and fulfill her dream? Well, ladies and gentlemen, please place your bets. Now then, if you placed a golden sovereign thinking she had passed, well, you just lost your money. Unfortunately, she failed yet again. But to me, she is a winner, as her most noble aim is she wants to become a teacher. At current, it is not known if she will try again next year. But I sincerely hope she does, as she does deserve the sweet taste of victory more than anyone else I know. The rule of the evil Khmer Rouge was decades ago, but that does not make it a lifetime ago, as there are many who walk amongst us who remember the years of terror. In the final days of the Khmer Rouge, a tragedy befell a district on the Mekong River in Kampong Cham province. And that tragedy proved just how very cruel the Red soldiers were. Following a purge order, they used the 1978 floods to kill thousands upon thousands of men, women and children. And these mass killings would have been forgotten, but for an investigation by ourselves at the Khmer Times, who found a survivor who told of what really happened in the floods of 78. Her name is Meow, and she was just 15. She was separated from her family, and she was assigned by the Khmer Rouge to work in the Youth Mobile Unit, which was slave labour in the rice fields. She barely survived on starvation rations, each day walking a very thin line between life and death. In August of 1978, there was a massive flood of the Mekong River that caused water levels to rise. Mao had asked people if her family had survived the flood, and in our interview, she said to us, "I was told that the Khmer Rouge soldiers had put all the new people on a boat without telling them where they were going. When the boat returned, it was empty. Everyone on that boat was killed. They were struck from behind and thrown into the river. Even the children had their hands tied behind their backs and were also thrown into the water to drown." The Khmer Rouge soldiers tried to hide their atrocities, but by flooding the fields to wash the dead bodies away, but they failed. And it is this testimony from Mao that shows the floods of 78 were not just a natural disaster, as stated in the records, but was yet another cruel and sadistic way that the Khmer Rouge killed thousands of men, women, and children. Mao recalls seeing the rotten and swollen bodies with their arms tied behind their backs on the river banks, all murdered by local cadres. She said, "The flood caused starvation, which was already killing us, but the Khmer Rouge thought it was not enough, and they kept on killing." In the eastern zone where she was, it is estimated 250,000 people were killed during the last 6 months of 1978. That's 250,000 dead in one zone in 6 short months. The terror that this lady lived through is almost unimaginable, but her testimony now sheds new light on why so many thousands of people died in the floods of 1978. It's time to have a look ahead and see what the weather has in store for us next week.
Okay, so here we are at the weather, and as always I do like to show you a photo just to make the news a bit more interesting, and this week it's this photo. Now this is in the jungle, and I noticed this, and if you look closely you will see there's lumps of temple just on the riverbanks, and there's only these 3-4 blocks left of what was once a temple, and it's literally being sucked back into the earth from whence it came, and I think that's a beautiful photo. That's something I did this week. But what is more important is what next week's all about, and it is of course all about the weather. Now what we see, it's sunshine. Holy moly, there's a bit of rain at the end there, but I'll tell you what, if I was a gambling man, I'll tell you this much: I think the rainy season is over. But look at that humidity. It's up as high as 80 degrees.
This has been the Khmer Times News. Please do subscribe and comment and stay up to date with all the breaking news by following us on both Facebook and Telegram. This has been Paolo Bonini, and that was the week that was. I'll see you next weekend for your weekly Roundup.